Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Vestiges of History, where objects tell of storied lives. My name is Dylan. So today what I have for you is a collaboration between Vestiges of History and Gabi's Vintage. Many of you may know her from her TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and her Substack. Gabi is a vintage clothing historian and enthusiast, and I sought out her expertise on Ada Strauss's dress from her time as a comedian in the late 40s, early 50s. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to Gabi. Hi, Gabi. Thank you for joining me today in this collaboration. I'm really excited for it. To start, here is Ada's dress and her uniform. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about yourself, what you do, what your philosophy is behind vintage clothing, what it really means to you, and where you got your start.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me. My name is Gabi. I go by Gabi's Vintage online, where I post videos about vintage clothes and fashion history, mostly as it relates to my grandma, who was a vintage collector her entire life. She collected when she was a little girl up until now. She still collects. And I inherited a bunch of her vintage pieces and sort of just started learning about the stories that go along with them, especially my family, what it was like to be a woman in the 1950s. And I've really found a lot of joy in exploring like the humanity. And I think it's something that we interact with every single day, right? Clothing. But sometimes we don't necessarily like take a second to acknowledge how much story are in the clothes that we wear. So that is what I love about it. And yeah, I'm really excited to get into these pieces today.
Heck yeah. So on my side of the table, I take it past the material culture into the study of the human and what their existence was like. In Ada's case, she was born in 1917 in good old state of Virginia, to a wealthy family, which enabled her the privilege of learning music and being kind of a natural musician and entertainer. She was a teacher in the mid 30s, then joined the army in World War II, where she was a WAC in the 403rd Women's Army Corps band. And from there, she really flourished. She created a variety show out of the women in her band. The band worked in hospitals, so they're around the men who were wounded in such a way that they warranted being returned to the United States. And so their job was to keep morale up, and they did it exceedingly well. After the war, she pivoted into stand-up comedy. Back then, it wasn't even called stand-up. She utilized her violin skills, much like Jack Benny. So I don't know what the design of this is. I can tell you that it's rayon crepe printed with sequins, and these are gelatin sequins. And it has been slightly altered from its original design by a cousin who received it from her in like the 70s. It used to have like you used to be able to tie it in the front.
Uh,
Yeah.
I will show you. I went searching for patterns
Mhm.
because, we looked at the inside and the seams look unfinished. There's no label. It looks like it might be handmade.
Yeah.
And I found a number of these patterns from the 40s, but they all tie in the front. And I went, oh no, that's not quite right. So the fact that it was altered, okay.
Yeah. The cousin who owned it was very open about that. And like she deleted the tie and made like hook and eye arrangement here at the bottom of the neckline. Ada was tall for that generation too. So this is in her publicity photos a lot, but she also favored similar designs throughout her career, and that lasted until 1955.
Oh, cool. Wow. Okay. Oh my goodness. Yeah. Okay. Can I dive into the things that I'm excited about?
Please.
Okay, so you mentioned the rayon crepe, which was invented in the 19th century but didn't become particularly popular until the 20s/30s because it was a cheaper alternative to silk. And then once you get into World War II and silk is needed for things like parachutes, rayon is incredibly popular. It's sort of characterized by like that pebbly kind of a feeling.
Yep.
And then those gelatin sequins are absolutely like emblematic of 30s, 40s. Metal and glass would have been sequins before, but as we know, those were needed for war efforts. So people started making them out of animal byproduct or gelatin, and they were prone to heat and moisture. So the fact that they're still here means that like it had to have been taken care of enough that they didn't melt and they didn't get super sticky, which is so cool. The other thing I noticed right away is that nature motif, which you see on a lot of 1940s garments. Um, the patterns tended to be smaller as opposed to larger. So when you were trying to match them up while sewing, you were using less fabric waste. And then there's that little like ruching detail on her stomach area, the waist area. That was also a popular detail because it didn't use excess fabric. It wasn't like you were adding a trim or a lace. It was just you were kind of playing with the way that the fabric laid. And I think it's so beautiful. And then that midriff is so theatrical. The fact that it wasn't like an everyday thing. You weren't regularly wearing your stomach out like that. It's so to me like she was a performer. This was a theatrical costume. The fact that it's full length like makes it a particularly special garment. And then does it have shoulder pads? Do you know?
No shoulder pads, although
Okay.
there is like, yeah, the word you would use is ruching here
Mm-hmm.
above the bosom here, and then it's just a drop off. There's not even a seam for a shoulder or armhole up here.
Mm. She in the photos, she just has really strong shoulders. So I
Yeah,
assume maybe it was being aided by something.
she
But
had
I
a lot
mean,
of confidence.
yeah, that's it. She was standing tall. Um, that's, the ideal silhouette was to be strong and sort of
Yeah.
patriotic and yeah, that's so cool. And then let me I'm gonna paste into the chat the couple of patterns that I found online.
Okay.
Um, they're both from 1946. So, and they look kind of similar to this. They have that open and then it ties in the front, and they
Oh,
aren't
totally
crazy,
do.
right?
Dang, that's cool. Okay, so that really, really helps. So she
Mm,
definitely probably made this. Yeah, she definitely made this. The fact that there isn't a label was kind of
mm-hmm,
for me because I mean it's very like there's so many details in here
mm-hmm,
that it doesn't say homespun on the exterior.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Oh, funny story though, as a dude, I could not figure out how to get this on the mannequin.
Because of the open stomach.
Like the proportions of the mannequin did not fit the hips. And
Uh,
then I'm struggling with it. I'm like, oh wait, there's a zipper and the bosom opens. So
that is
it's
so funny.
it's like a step in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Things I was not equipped for.
Yes, yes. But so cool. And the fact that you have that picture of her wearing it is so special.
Dude, I've been tracing the story of Ada for over a decade.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Mm,
It was nuts. I digitized a photo album from a member of the band, put it on my Facebook page. It sat there for a decade, and then all of a sudden, all their daughters started commenting. Oh
wow.
my God, that's my mom. Da, 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 da. And there was a ringleader, and that ringleader who found the album and sent it via email to all the other ladies. That's Ada's daughter-in-law. And
Wow.
yeah, and then one thing led to another. They invited me out to Massachusetts to digitize Ada's collection. Before they donated the majority of her paper stuff to the Women's Army Museum in oh Fort Charity Adams. Like
Mm-mm.
it just got renamed, so forgive me, internet. Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, and that's where I found all of the stand-up stuff. She kept everything. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That generation tends to keep things because they didn't know when they wouldn't, when they would need it.
I managed in 2012, I managed to speak to her for about 30 seconds before her caregiver took her off the phone.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
She
Wow.
passed away at age 100. Yeah.
Wow.
And she played music until probably a year or two before that.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow.
She was rad. She was the epitome of rad. Like, like living life on her own terms, like
Mm-hmm.
what woman decides to be a comic in the late 40s in New York
Mm-hmm.
when it's like unheard of, and like what we knew of comedy back then, it's through movies. There's not a thing like this.
Mm.
And yeah, so I'm working to make sure she gets the credit that she's due as an early comedian.
Mm.
I also have her jokes digitized. So
Really?
she typed those. Yeah.
Wow. I
Yeah.
would love to see some of that. That is so cool.
Because that's why I do this, and I assume that's why you do this, is sharing the stories, exposing people
Mhm.
to other experiences. It's the most enriching thing about this is engaging with people, and especially like descendants. Oh, I never knew that about grandpa. Oh, well, here's some more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, I agree completely. Yes.
But
Should we talk about
yeah,
the modified uniform?
so yeah, this is her Women's Army Corps service uniform, complete with shirt, tie, full length skirt, but she modified the service jacket or blouse
Mhm.
um, to emulate that of what the men would wear at the end of the war, which would be called an egg jacket. She deleted, I'll just show you as a comparison here. Let's see. She deleted two bottom slash pockets and then took that material, made a belt out of it, and then utilized the same brass buttons.
That is so cool.
No.
Yeah, I had to do a little research because I am not particularly familiar with like regulations. I'm not sure what was supposed to be worn. But I read somewhere that it wasn't necessarily terribly uncommon for women to modify their uniforms like that.
Nope.
Really? That surprises me.
In my opinion, women are by far more creative than men, especially when you're in a situation where you are forced to wear the same thing. So most women are going to put their spin on it. But yeah, like especially the ladies had skills to do this. Like,
Mhm.
like when I look at, other modified garments belonging to men, they took it to somebody. And yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah,
Mhm. They
yeah,
didn't necessarily know how to do it themselves. That makes sense.
yeah.
That is so cool. And yeah, I see how even just the little adjustment of that belt would have emphasized a waist more. Yeah, I love it.
And there's even another buttonhole to cinch it in more.
Of course there is. Of course. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, yeah. This is American Women in Uniform. This goes into nearly every single women's organization, military or civilian, volunteer, for instance. Like this is the National Security Women's Corps Incorporated and their rank system and what you expect to see in the uniform. It is in color, which is rare. And this
Mm.
came out in 1943. So to help you with your studies, I will see if I can
Thank
get that to you.
you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Um, can I ask like just a few questions about Ada, just out of curiosity? So she was Ada Strauss Hoffer. What was her last name?
Jaffer.
Jaffer. And that was her husband?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
that was her husband. Her
Okay.
husband is an entirely different story, just as fascinating as her.
Mm.
Um, New York kid, played tennis with guys like Hemingway, in like the teens and 20s. Ada's father is also really, really cool. He was a bacteriologist. Uh,
Mm.
he owned a couple of laboratories,
Mm.
was very well respected. He went overseas in World War One, and he created a vaccine or some type of medicine that cured horses of a disease for the U.S. Army because we were having high attrition rates with horses. and that was like his thing. He's also responsible for being a founding member and chairman of an organization that still exists called the Richmond Forum.
Mm,
He was very much about free speech
mm,
and desegregation. Like
mm.
there's an FBI file about the family
Wow.
where it says like, pardon the phrase, they allow colored people into their home
Mm,
and they are for free speech. The family love to throw salons with musicians, no matter the race, no matter
mm,
the creed.
mhm,
Um, and that's where music came into play with her, being
mm,
exposed to that. Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah.
I read there's like a whole thesis out there about how frequently women who were music teachers at schools became band leaders. Fascinating.
So here's another tidbit. At the same time, she's a comedian.
Mm.
She's also a musical therapist at two VA hospitals in New York.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
And this was when music therapy was like, what even? It's like it's a morale thing, not a psychological thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the photos of her there are amazing.
Mm.
There's testimony that she wrote down where, ex-soldier played, the flute
Mm.
before the war and lost his hands, but
Mm.
wanted to play again. So she bought him a flute and then worked with him to get him to play again with the modified prosthetics the army gave him. It's
Wow.
it's heartbreaking, heartwarming Hallmark stuff. Like
Mm-hmm.
the humanity. There,
Mm-hmm.
there's this beautiful picture. I'll send it to you. The hospital was desegregated.
Mm.
So there's this concert where she's near the piano. There's an African American soldier at the piano. There's all these guys milling around. They're all having a good time. It is, it completely flips the narrative of what we believe race relations were at that time.
Mm.
Because, these guys, they didn't really divide themselves, by race in this hospital. They, you know, they all knew why they were there. If I could write a book about her, which I might, it would be an easy write for sure.
Mm. Oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing everything that you've, I mean, I'm sure not everything, you've got a book worth, but
Yeah,
everything we've heard today.
no problem. This is rad. I'm glad that
Mhm.
we can do this, and I hope we get to do this again.
Yes. And for my audience's sake, will you just give a little like where can people find you?
Okay. Hi, my name is Dylan Almondral. I'm the host of Vestiges of History on YouTube and on Instagram, but I'm more active on YouTube. Um, I tell stories through material culture, through the objects people leave behind. And I'm glad to be able to do collaborative work and share these stories with wonderful influencers like Gabby. So, yeah.
Sweet, thank you.
So that was rad. I'm very grateful to Gabby for giving us her time and participating in this as a collaborator and really showing off her expertise in tracking down those fine details. I would never have known to go after the patterns. I would not have figured out those details like that. You never know what stories an object will tell you, and there's never anything wrong with asking for help. As always, you never know who will tell your story. Live a storied life.